In Ecuador, jurists demanded the reestablishment of the constitutional order and asked international organizations to take measures to guarantee the integrity of the electoral process. In Russia, a new Ukrainian drone attack took place in the early hours of this Tuesday morning against the city of Kursk. And Palestinian authorities reported that at least 17 Palestinians were killed and 69 wounded in Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Ecuador, jurists demanded the reestablishment of the constitutional order and asked international organizations to take measures to guarantee the integrity of the electoral process after allegations of widespread fraud by incumbent President Daniel Noboa. The group expressed its deep concern over the multiple irregularities that have overshadowed the electoral process of last April 13, 2025. In this regard, experts urged the international community, jurist organizations in the region, and Ecuadorian civil society to speak out, condemn, and monitor the situation in Ecuador. The 2025 general elections were held in Ecuador on Sunday, April 13th. The results published by the National Electoral Council give as winner to Daniel Noboa. However, this process is under scrutiny because, according to specialists, there was a fraud of origin. Our correspondent Gabriela Mena tells us more.
In Ecuador, Election Day ended with the announcement of the National Electoral Council CNE giving Daniel Noboa as the winner. However, this result generates surprise among diverse sectors. For experts, the scenario that Ecuador is going through can be cataloged as a fraud of origin. This because Daniel Noboa remained as president and candidate, managing to maneuver from the executive in his favor.
It
is not only the political pressure on the one hand, but also the lack of autonomy and of guaranteeing the transparency of these processes by the CNE. That is, unfortunately in Ecuador the law is there, but it ends up being dead slow because it happens that they remain at the service of the government in power. The law is not complied with.
But there is more. Noboa not only used state funds, which exceed $570 million, but he also used constitutional resources to decree a state of exception in Quito and 7 provinces where the candidate for the citizen revolution, Luisa Gonzalez, had the highest percentage of acceptance. In addition, he did not request a license from the National Assembly to begin his campaign period and only notified the CNE, ignoring the Ecuadorian constitution.
We must take into account that there has been a discrediting of the left and of progressivism and humanism, giving the impression that if a person, a candidate, a politician, or a public official is progressive or humanist or has this tendency, he or she is a leftist and is practically associated with crime. That is what these people have been saying.
All this has made the different electoral observers question the lack of action on the part of the National Electoral Council and the transparency of this democratic day, for which they even sent an official letter to the CNE notifying them of these localized irregularities. In addition, they question why Daniel Noboa closed his electoral campaign with international artists when the code of democracy does not allow it.
Noboa, como yo lo he dicho en varias ocasiones, es una amenaza para la democracia.
Noboa, as I have said on several occasions, is a threat to democracy. He is a threat to the rule of law. What is going to happen now that he has all the power and has been re-elected for 4 more years? It is very likely that there is a high risk that he will commit more abuses and that it will be an arbitrary government.
From the Citizen Revolution, the candidate, Luisa Gonzalez, stated that she does not acknowledge the results presented by the CNE and affirmed that fraud was committed in the registration of votes to benefit him against the will of the people. a point with which the citizens agree.
Debemos abrir las urnas porque se vio el fraude.
We must open the ballot boxes because the fraud was seen, the fraud is seen. It is seen because in the territory we were talking to the people. In the territory it was seen that they were all with Luisa.
Now, the citizen revolution and allied forces, as well as multiple sectors of the citizenry, demand the reopening of the polls and transparency of the results, as well as the investigation of the last-minute arbitrary changes in electoral precincts, the military intimidation and obstruction of electoral observers, and, above all, the manipulation of official records.
Gabriela Mena, teleSUR Ecuador.
A U.S. court will hold a hearing this Tuesday on the case of Kilmar Abreu Garcia, the Salvadoran deported by administrative error to a maximum security prison in El Salvador. The Salvadoran citizen continues to be deprived of his liberty in his country of origin, even though he had a court order protecting him from deportation since 2019. Since his arrest on March 12, 2025, the family of the kidnapped migrant has been demanded his release and safe return to the U.S. For its part, the government of El Salvador underlined that there were no reasons to return Kilmar Abreu Garcia after qualifying him as a terrorist. In this context, after U.S. President Donald Trump met with Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele amid general outrage over migrant transfers to Salvadoran jail, protesters gathered in front of Salvadoran embassy in Washington, D.C. as U.S. President Donald Trump received Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele, who is now his key ally in a controversial initiative to deport undocumented migrants to a notorious Salvadoran prison. In a meeting at the White House, Bukele affirmed that he would not return Kilmar Abreu Garcia. The deportation of Abreu Garcia to El Salvador has unleashed a serious legal crisis after the Trump administration admitted that his deportation was due to an administrative error. And now we have a short break coming up. But first, remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Vietnam, the president of China, Xi Jinping, held a diplomatic meeting with his Vietnamese counterpart Luong Quang within the framework of his tour of Southeast Asia. During his visit, the Chinese president also met with the top leader and Secretary General of the Southeast Asian countries' Communist Party, To Lam, to witness the signing of 45 cooperation agreements between the two nations. Xi Jinping's visit comes as Beijing and Hanoi seek ways to deal with the tariff attacks by U.S. President Donald Trump. President Xi Jinping assured that China is ready to receive products from Vietnam and stressed the need to strengthen cooperation in supply chains and expand collaboration in technologies such as 5G networks and artificial intelligence. After closing his official visit to Vietnam, the president of China, Xi Jinping, warned that Trump's tariffs war will generate a progressive deterioration in global trade. Precisely, the Chinese leader warned of the imbalance in the global economic order and stressed the importance of boosting confidence in the links between Asian nations. In addition, Xi expressed that the trade war unleashed by the United States is against the interests of all countries and urged unilateralism. During his stay in Hanoi, Xi Jinping and his Vietnamese counterpart signed a package of 45 agreements, including the development of artificial intelligence, trade in agricultural products, and customs cooperation. After his visit to Vietnam, the Chinese President Xi Jinping arrived in Malaysia in a trip expected to produce deals and increase bilateral cooperation. Accompanied by cabinet ministers and senior government officials, President Xi will undertake a 3-day state visit at the invitation of the King of Malaysia, Sultan Ibrahim. Xi is also scheduled to hold a meeting with Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim him to discuss bilateral cooperation. In this regard, the Chinese leader expressed hope that the visit would mark the beginning of a new era in cooperation as the nations celebrate the 50th anniversary of their diplomatic ties. The trip comes amid China's raging trade war with the U.S. after President Trump's set of tariffs on Chinese imports. In Russia, a new Ukrainian drone attack took place in the early hours of this Tuesday morning against the city of Kursk. At least one person died and 9 more were injured in the attack on the Russian city. Security agencies said it was a deliberate attack on the civilian infrastructure that caused fires in several residential buildings. The military headquarters in the city of Kursk said that Ukrainian drones also hit an ambulance garage, resulting in damage to 11 vehicles.
The Russian Investigative Committee has opened a criminal case on a terrorist act based on the fact of a massive attack by the Ukrainian armed forces on the city of Kursk. According to the investigation, last night Ukrainian militants, using unmanned aerial vehicles of the aircraft type, carried out a massive attack on residential buildings in the city of Kursk. An unmanned aerial vehicle also hit an ambulance station. As a result of the crime, a woman was killed and 9 more people were injured. In addition, residential buildings, other civilian buildings and more than 10 ambulances were seriously damaged.
Russia denounced Ukraine has not complied with the truce agreed with the United States regarding attacks on energy facilities. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that Ukrainian troops are attacking its energy infrastructure on a daily basis, which shows that the agreement is being violated. The Russian official ratified that Moscow maintains the ceasefire against energy targets, which was established for a period of 30 days. The Kremlin warns that since the entry into force of the truce between Russia and Ukraine, the Kyiv regime has ignored its ceasefire obligations and continues its shellings. In Sudan, extremists of the Rapid Support Forces announced having seized the Samsam camp in northern Darfur 2 years following the outburst of the civil war. Sources close to the Sudan Liberation Movement announced that such seizure of the Samsam refuge camp by the RSF brought about 450 deaths and many injured. Likewise, over 70,000 Sudanese civilians were forced to leave their homes to run away from the RSF attacks. In this context, the United Nations estimated the Samsam camp used to be home to over 500,000 displaced persons because it had been labeled as one of the largest safe zones in Sudan. In this context, the World Food Programme warned all parties involved of hunger crisis in Sudan since the beginning of the conflict in April 2023 and calls for more funding. The organization called on to end restrictions on aid access and facilitate humanitarian efforts to the affected population. The conflict has forced at least 13 million people to flee their homes, and some 8 million are internally displaced, while many more have crossed the country's borders to neighboring countries where they are also in need of humanitarian assistance. It should be noted that the cuts have also affected the World Food Programme, with reports indicating that terminated U.S. funding for some of its programs has been restored, while others remain in limbo. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the most recent events. Final short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Palestinian authorities reported that at least 17 Palestinians were killed and 69 wounded in Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. This way, at least 3 people were murdered and others injured when Israeli warplanes attacked a tent sheltering displaced people west of the town of Khan Yunis in the south of the devastated Palestinian enclave. 2 more people were killed in an airstrike on a tent near the Sport Stadium in Beit Lahija in northern Gaza. The latest figures bring the number of people killed since Israel broke the ceasefire on March 18th to 1,630, with 4,302 wounded, according to the Gazan Health Ministry.
Every day there are massacres and martyrs, not just my son and my grandson, every day children die. What is the fault of the child sleeping next to his father? Yes, he was born in the war and died in the war. He was only 1 year and 4 months old. What did he do to deserve this?
Doctors in Gaza denounced a 40% increase in the number of children killed, a figure that currently exceeds 500 children deaths. According to reports from Al Nasser Hospital, to date, 7,065 children have been maimed, 834 children have suffered amputations, and around 500 have died since Israel resumed its attacks on the Palestinian territory in October 2023. This crisis is aggravated by the severe shortage of medicines in the enclave, which makes the survival and recovery of affected children even more difficult. The Palestinian resistance of Hamas qualified as unacceptable the new Israeli proposal for a 45-day ceasefire agreement in the Palestinian territories. The Hamas movement rejected the Israeli proposal, which includes, among other things, the disarmament of the resistance and the imposition of conditions that would make the violation of any truce fragile. Hamas demands that any future agreement must include a permanent ceasefire and the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces in the Gaza Strip. In parallel to its genocidal campaign in Gaza, the Israeli army carries out massive assaults in various locations in the occupied West Bank. At least 3 Palestinians were arrested and taken away blindfolded by the Israeli occupation forces during a military raid in the town of Anata on Tuesday morning. Hours earlier, a Palestinian child was rushed to hospital after being shot in the back by occupying forces in the city of Awarta. His condition is still unknown. Meanwhile, 79 consecutive days of the Israeli assault on the city of Tulkarem, with thousands displaced, hundreds arrested, homes destroyed, and at least 13 people killed since the beginning of the aggression. The Vatican advanced Monday that the Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí, creator of Barcelona's Sagrada Familia Basilica, gathered all virtues to go through the sainthood process. On his first official statement, Pope Francis made such declaration as one of the initial steps to turn Gaudí, alias God's architect, into a saint. Then the Vatican would have to beatify him before canonization, which is the last step. Gaudí's devotees had requested the Holy See to become him a saint for over 30 years. They grounded in the fact that the Sagrada Familia great stoneworks and spires persuaded people to convert to Catholicism. Moreover, the Gaudí Beatification Society, made up of 80,000 people worldwide, have been praying to Gaudí, imploring him to perform miracles. In Cuba, the International Puro Film Festival of Jibara kicked off Tuesday in eastern Holguín province. The 19th edition of the event will be held until Saturday, April 19th. Attending the festival will be theater groups Palabras al Viento and Codanza, as well as recognized local actors such as Taimí Alvariño, Osvaldo Doime Adios, and Jacqueline Arenal. In addition, over 500 works had been submitted to this comprehensive festival to be decided upon by international juries. In this year's edition, Cuba competes with 25 films, Argentina with 11, Spain brings 9, Mexico and Peru comprises 6 each, while Colombia, the United States, Chile, and Uruguay have 5 each. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.